Welcome to DisruptEDtv. Our guest today is Barry Lefkowitz. And Barry is, Joe, we have a lobbyist on the program. Now, we've just had a chance to talk a little bit with Barry.
Sure.
And there is what the public understands, what they understand about lobbyists, and then there is what a lobbyist actually is. And so my opening question to you, Barry, is what does a lobbyist have to do with education?
Well, first of all, as I mentioned to you, in my first lifetime, I was a high school teacher. Well, it hasn't changed any. It's just that my audience has changed. So it doesn't matter whether it's members of the state legislature or members of Congress, I'm still teaching. As a lobbyist, you're trying to get them to understand a particular issue or a concept. And so just as a classroom teacher has to be able to get their students to understand concepts and understand what it takes to do a certain thing, I have to do the exact same thing. And just as a classroom teacher has to be and should be, lobbyists also, like for example, I'll go in and provide, whether it's a legislator or a member of Congress, material that is like a fact sheet that will lay out the issues so that after I finish and leave, they then have something in their hand that will remind them, of our conversation.
This is, I don't want to interrupt you, but what's important about this is teaching kids about math and history is not unimportant, but teaching them how to think is really what you're advocating here.
Well, as a matter of fact, I just recently taught my granddaughter's 6th grade class on lobbying and interest groups, and I showed how their teacher was part of an interest group because with the new tax reform bill, the deduction that teachers got for buying materials and things for school supplies, they lose that. And so I then explained to Lily's class that Mrs. Canaway belongs to an interest group and they're going to be lobbying Congress to try and restore that deduction. And then I took what Lily had shared with me the night before, that her school system is being affected by overbuilding of houses in Chesapeake, Virginia. And it's putting lots of cars on the road. But more importantly, the effect on her and her classmates were this Chesapeake is going to have to rezone the schools. So it means that a number of her classmates are going to go to a different school, and that other school will be sending students to her school. And so what I did is I had her hire me for $1, and I made them part of an interest group and walked them through what they had to do as far as mayor and council, and explained all the different steps that they actually could do to help influence the fact of going before mayor and council.
Give them a real live civic group.
Exactly.
Wow, that's
This is actually civics in action.
Civics in action,
It's that whole idea of being able to bring public policy discussion into a classroom, even with K-12 class students.
Oh, of course.
Is key, because that is, as we said, it's about teaching kids how to become functional adults by knowing how to think through issues, like the kinds of issues you taught your granddaughter's class.
Well, one of the things that I think needs to be done more of, and it doesn't matter whether we're talking about issues of interest groups or whatever, is the school systems need to be utilizing the businesses and the community as a whole to become part of the learning process. And I think there's a couple reasons why. One is we need to be able to help prepare them for being more social, because we depend too much on technology, and we're losing that ability to be social. Two, it helps teach them to become part of a community itself by interacting with the community. Three, I think it helps the students themselves become more confident in themselves by having that interaction with adults. And four, I think what happens is that, society as a whole is changing. But we're not really preparing our young people, and it doesn't matter whether we're talking about K through 12 or even college, where I'm a senior adjunct professor of political science. They need to be able to have more experiences that are relevant to their lives and also relevant to what may happen in terms of where they're moving from a standpoint of what they'll eventually do from a occupation standpoint.
That is key. Let me take this in just a slightly different direction.
Sure.
It's a common complaint today that parents are frustrated that there's too much politic going on inside of the classroom. But that politics debate is more about which candidate is better than which other candidate. You're raising this to a whole new level. There should be policy discussions in the classroom outside of any partisan kind of discussion. Isn't that what you're advocating?
Without a question. And I understand the issue about politics because I joke with all my friends, I've been doing this for 45 years.
Really?
Yeah, I'm actually one of the first registered lobbyists for the state of New Jersey.
No kidding, wow.
Yeah, before, it really evolved to what it is today with all the interest groups. But, setting aside politics is nothing more than a vehicle. We need to be able to deal with policy and understanding how policy takes place. Just like when I was teaching Lily, our granddaughter's class, all right, I had to use the politics in terms of how the steps that they go through, but the key was how do they affect the policy of what the mayor and council were looking at that affected her life and her classmates' lives.
That's it. And that's, see, to me, that's such an important and kind of an understudied focus of education. I think we live in a world of sound bites where we remember what we heard yesterday on television and we just spout that over and over again. And all too often that's a substitute for logical thinking. And what I'm enjoying about our conversation, Barry, is that you're saying we can talk about policy and think our way through these issues without having to blame one or another candidate or political party for how things turn out. And we're at a point in the program where we have to take a break, but I want to talk more about that and about some of your experience as a high school teacher that kind of got you started on this road. So
I'm more than happy to.
Back after this break with Barry Lefkowitz here on DisruptEDtv.
Be right back.
We're having a great conversation today with Barry Lefkowitz here on DisruptEDtv. My name is Al Cini,
I'm Joe Osamendi.
but the guy you really need to get to know is this guy, Barry Lefkowitz. And Barry, before the break and during the break, we talked about how you can discuss policy and maybe even get a debate going about policy without touching that political third rail, that teaching people to think without necessarily arguing in counterproductive ways. Now, you related an experience you had as a high school teacher, I think, during the Vietnam War.
Yes.
Maybe you can walk us through that.
Oh, sure. I was, during the height of the Vietnam War, 67 through 70,
Right.
I was teaching high school at Burlington City High School in Burlington County, and I had an unusual mix. I was teaching both social studies and science.
Interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
In terms of social studies, what I did is I team teached with the English department to teach all my students how to do debate. And what we did was we did the debate in terms of, from a policy standpoint, the Vietnam War. And what I exposed my students to was I brought in the Morristown Friends, which most people probably are not aware, but most friends groups are anti-war.
Right.
Sure.
So
Quakers.
the Quakers, right. So I brought them in to speak to my students, and then I also brought in the military because of Fort Dix, being a hop, skip, and
You
a jump.
balanced it out.
Sure.
So they would have an opportunity to be able to hear both sides of the policy of being in the Vietnam War. And additionally, by the way, we set up to have the students go out and see the training that the soldiers went through in preparation for going into Vietnam. And it's interesting, in doing that though, I was naive because I was a young teacher at the time, but it raised the cockles of a lot of my teachers there who asked me, what right did I have as a teacher coming in and doing that? And I thought that teaching was about helping open up minds.
Right.
That's
exactly.
what it is
Which
about.
Right, which is what it's supposed to be. And but it's interesting because I got a lot of calls from parents thanking me.
Well,
Very interesting.
And you may recall that in 1968, at the Democratic National Convention, the old mayor Daley
Right, in
had
Chicago.
all of, in Chicago, there was peaceful demonstrations in the park by those who were anti-war, and the police beat the crap out of the kids there. Parents of my students called me up and said, what can you do as a teacher? I brought together a group of my students that summer, because the convention was in August, brought them together, and we created in my classroom what was called the Institute for Political and Legal Education, in which we turned the community into part of the classroom. And eventually what happened from that is, the Commissioner of Education had us write it into a federal project, and we eventually were in 40 states
Really?
teaching teachers how to turn the community into part of their classroom
Right.
and give real life experiences.
that's great.
So we were working with the legislature, we did some filming in Congress with the students. I mean, it was a phenomenal experience. I did that for 8 years, and what happened is that our board of directors for the program said, the Commissioner of Education for New Jersey borrows you to help with educational legislation. It was called HEW, Health,
Right, yeah,
Education,
sure.
and Welfare at that time. You may recall that.
I do.
Because
We went to school with Thomas Jefferson.
Yes,
We remember
yes, I'm the same thing. And so they would borrow me to help with what's called markup. That's when you're in committee and the final amendments and everything. And I was responsible for helping with the federal funding for new and innovative programs in the field of education. That's how I got my lobbying
Well, that's how
start.
you started lobbying.
Sure.
That's how I started lobbying. And so after 8 years, the board said, the state borrows you, the feds borrow you, why don't you do it on your own? So my first client was education. It was the American Association of University Professors, because at that time I was also an adjunct professor for both political science and for the Masters of Public Policy program at Rutgers.
Yeah, great.
And that's how I got my start.
Well, that's logical. And I want to talk more about that too, because your
Sure.
role in improving education, which is really what you do as a lobbyist, I think is very important. But I want to just return for a second to a misconception about debate. The whole concept of debate, as it was originally conceived, was about creating informed discussion on matters of importance to society, which means you don't go into a debate with the assumption that one side is better than the other side, or that one side, you go into a debate with the intention of listening to both sides and keeping your mind open
And
during
based
that
on
discussion.
and based on the arguments and the facts that are laid out,
Yes.
that's then where you make the decision as to which team you felt provided the better arguments.
Right.
Well, and so debate really does still, every DisruptEDtv is around a disruptive idea.
Right.
So maybe our disruptive idea in this program is that you can have discussions about policy without getting all twisted around the axle of politics.
Right.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, I'll share with you an experience that was very troubling for me. I was in a private meeting with the former Speaker of the House, John Boehner from Ohio. He was having much difficulty within his caucus.
Right.
Because,
Remember that.
it's become so fractured in the different caucuses. And so I asked him, I said, Mr. Speaker, I said, when you have politics and policy, what happens? And he goes like this in the meeting. I have politics on this side, I have policy on this side, and politics always wins out. Now, that evolution has become dangerous to democratic principle.
Right. Absolutely.
That evolution is unfortunately what's happening to society as a whole, because people are now picking sides rather than looking at a total picture,
Right.
and then on the basis of a policy, not on the basis of a political party
Right.
or some diatribe. And so as an individual, with grandkids and everything, I get concerned about it.
This is, we have to take a break. This is an important subject to me, because if we want to raise a generation of adults to change the society in an improved society, then we have to teach them how to argue without fighting.
Right, there's a big
How
difference.
to, because there is a huge difference. And that's exactly what you're advocating. And teachers today should not be afraid to bring policy discussions into their classrooms. They just have to be prepared not to pick a winner.
Right.
They have to let that happen organically by informing both sides equally.
Keep it policy and
makes
not
sense.
politics.
Well, but also more importantly, is you have to have an administration with the courage to allow teachers to be able to do that.
To do that,
Right.
and some guidelines to make sure that
Right.
nobody's excluded or minimalized. And that's,
Correct.
We'll be right back with more Disrupted TV with a terrific guest. Barry, it's just wonderful having you here. Barry Lefkowitz will be right back.
Yep, stay with us. We're back.
Welcome back, everybody, to Disrupted TV. My name is Al Cini.
I'm still Joe Osamendi,
Joseph,
absolutely.
it's such a pleasure to work with you. But Barry,
And I'm still Barry Lefkowitz.
he's still Barry Lefkowitz, just like he was a minute ago. And we're glad you didn't change, Barry, because we're having such a great conversation. We want to keep this going.
My pleasure.
I think this is a great opportunity for you to talk about lobbyists as advocates, not the traditional lobbyists that most people may have in their heads.
Unfortunately, I think lobbying gets a bad rap, in part because
It gets a bad rap. You might as well just say that.
Well, they do.
Sure.
But I mean, I can sleep at night because I know that I'm not exactly a lobbyist. I consider myself an advocate,
Big difference.
which is a big difference. And the difference is this. Historically, I have only taken on and represented clients that I believed in the cause. I mean, I've had many offers over the years for things that could have made me a lot of money, but it was something that I didn't believe in.
Right.
And so it's got to be something that I feel that I can 110% believe in. For example, when I testify before, whether it's state legislature, Congress, or I've done 5 international countries, I never use a canned speech. I may turn in written material, but I'll only have a 3x5 card with a couple keywords or a phrase or something. And the reason is because I know the issue.
Right.
And I know and feel I know what has to be advocated, for that particular issue. And, legislators are used to, somebody comes in and, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Right.
And a lot of times, you'll see them chit-chatting with staff and so forth. But when you're able to provide direct eye contact
Right.
Yeah.
and be
Makes a
able
difference.
to say something that may include a particular member that's sitting on the panel, it's a completely, it's a completely different game. Plus, it gives the feeling that you're not just reading words or talking words, but it's something that you
really
feel.
feel.
And the approach I always like to do when advocating for someone is what I call the pro-con-pro. And by the way, as you know, I've written a book called Lobbying and Influence.
Yeah, we want you to
Right.
focus on that too.
Yeah,
That's great.
And the pro-con-pro process is where you lay the foundation for the issue for your client. You then tell the members that are listening to you what the opposition is going to say to them,
Okay.
so that you pull the rug out from underneath them right up front. And then, so that's the pro, the con, what the
What you
opposition
can
will
expect to
say.
hear.
And then the pro is what are the issues with their con position.
Right.
Got it.
And that's how I've always have approached it. And so in the main, I love what I do because, as I said in the, previously, I'm a teacher. I'm still a teacher. My job is to help advocate as a teacher for an interest group, and sometimes it's been an individual, or we represented a client in Burlington County, Belmont Homes, that their client base was homeless people and others. So generally speaking, they don't have a voice.
Right.
We were the voice for them, and we
provide that voice.
Yeah, and so we.
There may not be any economics in it, but
No.
you're doing it because it matters and
Right.
because it's important.
And my wife will tell you, to her chagrin, we often have taken on and done things for people just because it was the right thing to
Right.
do.
Sure.
Right.
Now, I know that that makes me different than what people consider
That
lobbyists are
stereotype
money.
of lobbyist may
Yeah.
actually be more narrowly couched than a lot of people think. I think the truth is that a lot of lobbyists probably do feel strongly about the positions they take. They're not all just in it for the money, and maybe
No.
only a minority of them are. And but when you said before that you're a teacher and you still are a teacher, one of the things you're teaching us today is that when you speak from your heart, most people who speak to an issue are so worried about making a mistake
Right.
that they practice carefully in advance and they suck all the emotion out of the argument. The truth is, when you feel strongly about something and you show people how you feel, you say more than just the words you say.
It has more impact. Plus, there's something else. Because they're so concentrating on reading that darn script,
Yeah, right.
that if somebody had testified before them, they've missed
The entire
a
thing.
key point
They're
that they
just
may
not
have
being
said
responsive.
that you can use, and if you're tied to the script, you can't use what anybody else said. So that way, as they're saying, I might write down a word and then incorporate it into what I'm advocating.
Right, because your approach is that approach you're talking about, you lose the message through the translation.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's really what happens.
Okay, so you're a lobbyist, and do you specialize in education, Barry? Is that a particular area of interest for you, or?
No, I'm considered one of the, obviously education, because, I'm the longest serving foundation trustee in the state. I think I have the record for 30-something years at Rowan College. Plus I was vice chair for 12 years. I'm, senior adjunct professor. I've been at Rowan College. Also, I did Rutgers at Oregon State University. I was an Oregonian. I guess that's what. Yeah,
You've been everywhere.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah. So education is near and dear to me, but also I'm supposedly considered one of the leading experts worldwide on transportation regulations. I've helped write the transportation regulations for limos and taxis in the state of New Jersey. I've got also federal legislation that we've helped write. So there are a lot of, so that's an area.
Sure.
But you'll find that in 45 years, I've represented everything from roller skating rinks to the National Association of Security Commercial Attorneys. I've represented Burlington Coat Factory and the discount retailers, which we were deeply involved in an issue called antitrust. And that's where full price retailers were trying to force manufacturers to stop doing business with the discount.
Right.
With smaller
Yeah.
businesses.
Remember that?
And so we had, antitrust legislation before Congress. Additionally, there was a major Supreme Court battle. People have heard whenever there's a Supreme Court justice nominee, they start talking about being borked. Well,
Yeah, right, I remember.
according to the newspapers, I was one of the lead lobbyists or advocates
Advocates, please.
Put it that way.
that helped bring down the nomination of Judge Bork because he was very antitrust. And because we felt that he would be detrimental to small business, to discounters, and to the
You
economy.
were advocating everybody having an
So
equal place at the
we
table.
actually brought down a Supreme Court nominee.
We just got the signal that we're coming up to the end of
Okay.
our program. There are two things I want to cover.
Sure.
The first is look into the camera and tell
Right here.
everybody how to reach you, Barry, and why they should call you.
Well, first of all, if you have something that you believe is a cause and that needs a voice, then please give me a call and I'll be glad to talk to you about it. You can reach me at 609-458-8329, which is my cell phone, because more people call me on my cell
They do
phone
that. That's how it
than
works
my
these days.
office
That's great,
anymore.
Barry.
So.
And they can reach out
Barry,
anytime.
thank you very
Oh,
much.
my
There's one more
pleasure.
thing I want you
Sure.
to say. The title of your book is Lobby and Influence.
It's called Lobbying and Influence. We wrote it originally for a client, and we're using it as a training device to train associations and groups on how to put together a grassroots lobbying campaign.
Terrific. And that I'm guessing I can get that on Amazon and.
I doubt it.
I'm going to go look for it anyway.
But I'll give you the CD for it, and
Okay.
you'll have the whole thing.
Thank
I give it free to my classes.
Oh, you do?
Oh, well, Barry, thank you for joining
My
us today.
pleasure.
on
You've been a
DisruptEDtv.
wealth of information. I hope that everybody's got as
He's
much.
taught us so much.
Yeah.
And hopefully you've learned something from Barry today too. Thank you for joining us today on DisruptEDtv. My name is Alcini.
I'm still Joe Osmendi.
And thank
I'm
you, Barry.
obviously still Barry Lefkowitz.
There you
There
go,
you
Barry.
Thank you, Barry Lefkowitz,
Thank
for
you, Barry.
joining us today.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you all. Take care now. Great.
Get that-